It's qualifying time then in MotoGP here at Phillip Island. It's the 19th round of our record-breaking 22-round 2025 World Championship campaign. Thankfully, after what was a pretty miserable and damp start to Sprint Saturday, the sun is shining, some blue sky overlooking the nearby Bass Strait. We're about 120 kilometres an hour away, about a 90-minute drive away from downtown Melbourne, the sport-mad city, hosted of course of the Australian Open tennis. Expecting some pretty blustery, some pretty windy conditions at the start of our main race day here tomorrow. As it stands right now, we are set fair for what should be two thrilling qualifying sessions in MotoGP. So far this weekend, well, there's been a one-rider domination produced by Phillip Racing's Marco Bezzecchi. He was in blistering form Bez on practice Friday to find a 126.492, the fastest ever motorcycle lap around this Phillip Island circuit, putting almost 0.3 of a second clear. Having a brilliant 1-2, Ralph Fernandez flying once again here in Australia. Coming up though in the opening 50-minute Q1 session is our most recent winner, the first rookie to win in MotoGP in 4 years, Fermin Aldeguer, fresh off the back of his stunning success in Mandalika. He missed out on direct place in Q2 by just 5 thousandths of a second. Jack Miller, the home crowd hero, he was 13th fastest yesterday. Coming up in Q1 with Binder, with Mia Zarco, who just had a tumble at turn 10 on the LCR Honda in FP2. Oliveira, Morbidelli, who's had a pretty tough weekend. Agura, Lorenzo Savadorian for Jorge Martin, and Nea Bastianini, he's having a miserable time in Australia. He was 20th yesterday. Michele Pirro replacing the absent world champion Marc Marquez on the factory Ducati and Somcat Jantra. Those are your riders, those are your participants in this upcoming Q1 session. Jack Miller made a great start, a lightning start to his home Grand Prix yesterday, and he led the way at the end of our 45-minute FP1 session. That certainly put smiles on a lot of the Australian fans who make their annual pilgrimage to this part of the world. It's about an hour and a half, 90-minute drive away from downtown Melbourne. 640-metre bridge connects Phillip Island to the Aussie mainland. And perhaps a surprise to see a Fermin Aldeguer then coming up in this Q1 session. It was very, very close. I mean, there was nothing in it between him and Acosta in 10th place at the end of practice yesterday. Just 5 thousandths of a career here in Phillip Island. It's going to have to be going some, isn't it? Because 3 visits in Moto2.
Only one of those previous occasions since the summer break has he actually made it through. That was in Misano when he came through to 10th on the grid. He's one of 3 Ducati riders in this Q1 session. With no disrespect intended to Michele Pirro, you'd be surprised if he advances through. Frankie Morbidelli, though, on reputation, on championship position, and on the machinery he's on, really should. But we've seen no evidence so far in this Australian Grand Prix weekend to suggest that Morbidelli will be a part of Q2.
Yeah, he's being overrun from the opposite side of that PR46 Ducati garage by Gian Antonio Diggia, 3rd quickest yesterday, 2nd fastest behind Bez in the earlier FP2 session. Well, that'll, I'm sure, warm the heart of Marc Marquez back at home in Europe. Sadly, of course, missing with a right shoulder blade fracture after his contact with Marco Bezzecchi on the first lap of Mandalika a couple of weeks ago, which, as a reminder, will see Bez serve a double long lap penalty in tomorrow's 27-lap Australian Grand Prix. Johan Zarco on screens there. Well, rightly, he's only got one bike at his disposal. We just saw Zarco take a tip off at turn 10, right to the tail end of that FP2 session. And a lack of stability on that IC213V. It's not been the best weekend so far for HRC from a technical point of view. Ran near yesterday on the Gardner Straight and this morning in FP2 for Luca Marini, who is directly through to Q2. Both the factory Hondas having what looked like terminal engine failures, maxed out in top gear down the 350 kilometres an hour start-finish straight.
Well, it certainly looked like Johan Zarco had calmed down there at the LCR box, but it didn't appear as if he cheered the fall that much. Certainly looking at the expression on his face, but he's got to focus on the job at hand here in qualifying 1. Which there are 12 riders battling it out for 2 places in qualifying 2. Certainly on the evidence we've seen so far this weekend and the lap times we saw yesterday, we're going to be looking at low 27s as a bit of a bare minimum here for a place in qualifying 2, if not high 26s. Yes, we have had some rain this morning, which might have washed some of the rubber away from this racetrack, but we're already with Bezzecchi doing low to mid 27s on fairly worn rubber in free practice 2. The best news, though, for everyone in this Q1 session after that early rain this morning is the track is bone dry for Q1.
Jack Miller then, can he get the Aussie fans singing themselves hoarse in Q1 this morning? Get himself through into that top 2. Start building up temperature in those tyres through the jaw-dropping, the breathtaking Stoner corner. Some awesome shots yesterday from that rear camera. We saw Pedro Acosta. He seems having a bit of fun going through that third corner. There is Lorenzo Savadori. Called upon once again next weekend at the Malaysian Grand Prix in Sepang. Brilliant, confirming in Australia. Unfortunately, Martin taking an extra couple of weeks or so to recover from that severe fracture he suffered in his right collarbone after that first lap sprint crash with Marco Bezzecchi and Motegi. The earliest we're going to see the Martinator back in the saddle on the RSGP will be the Portuguese Grand Prix. We'll port him out at the start of November.
Just saw another recently injured rider there coming through the picture a moment ago, Guru, who we didn't see much of, it's fair to say, yesterday. 18 plates for Guru on a 127.9, although he does feel a lot happier with that injury, which forced him to withdraw in such painful circumstances emotionally from his home Grand Prix, and then didn't even start the Indonesian Grand Prix weekend. He is taking a full part in this particular weekend, but it's never been his strongest venue, this.
First call, that doing corners, proper bumper, isn't it? You can see a few onboard shots so far this weekend when they're running through there and just shy of 200 kilometers an hour. It's a pretty rapid old corner. So many are in Phillip Island. You can just see the bumps there on board with Aldeguer on the Gresini Ducati. It's going to be the first flying lap then, put in by the Mandalika winner. The first gear turn 4 main, of course, put in after Jack Miller. Right to the top end of the circuit now, where you really do get a bit of a buffeting from the coastal winds. That's at the aptly named Siberia, where it's always pretty chilly down there. That come rain or shine.
It's Aldeguer towing Bastianini around, looking at how close they are on the racetrack. Can't see the beast, but he's quicker than Aldeguer at this stage. Which would have surprised many at this stage of the weekend, given how they've been going. Aldeguer through the third sector. Once again, Bastianini a shade quicker. He's around about a second or so behind us on the racetrack. So the beast on his KTM will be picking up a bit of faint Gresini Ducati slipstream when he comes out of turn 12.
Through 12 we go. Look at this corner. Fourth gear. Just under 107 kilometers now before he picks the throttle back up, and then now charges down the Gardner Straight, motoring up towards 350 kilometers an hour. Bastianini then does fire in the reference lap time, 128.249. That's immediately followed by Zarco. More with Daddy Doug. It's gone top. You're going to need something a lot better than low 28s. That's for sure to have any prayer of getting yourself through into Q1. And Miller delivers straight away. Jack Miller's first attack is a 127.393, which has got him comfortably at the top of the leaderboard, almost 3/10 clear of his former KTM colleague Brad Binder.
That matches what Miller did yesterday. He did a 27.3 in practice yesterday afternoon, so perhaps a bit of a cautious, circumspect first effort for Fabian Aldeguer, who certainly is pushing harder now on this second lap. So now around Siberia, just out in the distance as we look out from our commentary box window, and now heads towards the fearsome, fast third sector.
Through 8 we go. You can see a few scrape marks from some victims of turn 8 already so far this weekend. Juan Mir on the factory Honda. He's been frustrated to miss out yesterday. Felt like the Honda was certainly unstable going through some of the high-speed sections here in Phillip Island. We pick up the Spaniard then down into the bottom gear, turn 10, couple of rides on his outside there, just making sure that they were not impeding the 2020 world champion who's got Zarco as ahead of me. Zarco's Honda might have been punching a bit of clear air ahead of me. Here is Aldeguer then, over the line. We'll follow him very, very shortly. 8th at the moment, Aldeguer slots himself up in a P1. 127.201 from Aldeguer. Still not his best time of the weekend so far. 127.150 was his best to just miss out on Q2 yesterday.
Binder takes second place then from his former teammate Miller. Binder also on a 27.2, which is slightly faster, we're talking thousands, than he did yesterday. Aki Ayo looks on. Aldeguer then from Binder, Mir's best effort at 27.4. He needs to find another 2/10 here.
Yeah, Bastianini really is is having a weekend to forget. It was a pretty torrid time he had in Mandalika a couple of weeks ago. At the moment, down in 10th place. Shocking, by far the slowest of the KTMs out on circuit so far this weekend. Aldeguer making sure that there's left nothing to chance as he looks to fight for a fourth pole position in 4 visits to Phillip Island. As I mentioned, he's got the hat-trick in the last 3 in Moto2. We pick up the Spaniard, trail braking downhill. They're not too low the front. John Zarco did in FP2 earlier on. Oh, he's rolled out a bit, unfortunately. It's a shame because Aldeguer was on course potentially for a 27.1, maybe a 26, which would have been his third 26 of the weekend. What about Mir, 4th place? Once again, he's tucked in behind Johan Zarco's LCR Honda. Nothing going for Mir. It was a PB lap, a 127.442. but not good enough to get him inside that top 2.
So at the moment, no Hondas joining Luca Marini in Q2. Marini 7th yesterday and straight through, although he's had, as we've already discussed, a slightly troublesome morning. Alberto Puig watching the 2020 World Champion, who at the moment, as mentioned, needs to find a couple of tenths of a second. Consecutive laps for Mir on a 127.4.
So at the moment, it is Aldeguer and Binder that are in the box seats in terms of Q2 places. Between the Spaniard and the South African, just 0.05 of a second. There is quite a big gap then between Miller and Binder, 2nd to 3rd. Miller's going to have to find at least 10.5 if he's to trouble that top 2 in his second time attack.
Morbidelli managed to narrowly miss out in qualifying 1 last time out in Indonesia. He's on course to miss out, but it's not a particularly narrow miss out this time for Frankie. A 27.806 for him. He's got to fight over half a second if Frankie's going to make his way through to Q2. And he doesn't appear as if he's got any hope of doing so. Jack Miller there with some feedback to his team, trying to find out where he can find those crucial 2 tenths. He's probably going to need a 26 to be absolutely sure of a place in Q2.
Last time out in Mandalika was the first time Morbidelli's qualified outside of the top 10 in the whole of 2025. Looks like he might be struggling to force his way into the top 10 as well here this weekend. As it stays as is, Frankie will be on for a season worst grip position of 17th. Bit of a horror show at the moment. Not helped, a bit of a confidence sapping clash into the 3rd lap of the weekend. That's not going to really do much for your confidence when you bite the dust in the Durham corner at the start of FP1. Entry back out on circuit for his second time attack, closely followed by his former Moto2 major Moto2 colleague Somket Chandra. We know he's going to be staying part of the Honda family in 2026. Not in this paddock though. He'll be going for the fresh challenge for Jake Dixon in Honda's official factory World Superbike effort.
Even a very, very close look at his front tyre there when he got off his factory Honda. Currently 4th and on a 27.4. So we've got Zarco and Oliveira 5th and 6th ahead of Morbidelli. Agura's found a 27.8, which is his fastest lap time of the weekend, to take 8th place ahead of Salvatore Bastianini. Chantra, who's only been able to find a 29. He's not done a 28 all weekend. He's probably going to need a 27, if not a 26, to get himself into Q2. So his hopes are remote from here. Michele Pirro, a 29.3, currently the 12th of your 12 riders. As that particular Ducati Lenovo box that have been used to fighting for pole positions every weekend looks set to be occupying the back of the grid this time.
A potentially weekend-defining 6 minutes or so here, as far as Miller is concerned. Imperative, you feel, if he's going to be in that hunt for the top 6 here in front of his home crowd. He finds a way into this second qualifying session. Needs has mentioned a 10.5 at least if he is to nudge Binder Aldeguer out of that top 2. 3rd at the moment, Miller, which would be his 13th place on the grid. He has had his qualifying woes of late, as Jack Miller. We haven't seen him start inside the top 10. That's lost 10 on the grid in, but no. It's feels like an awful long time ago now, doesn't it, for the three-map comeback to get my heart rider.
Turn 2 we go then with Firmin Aldeguer. He's giving it plenty. and the Ducati's giving him plenty in response. He was moving around a lot there as he makes his way towards Stoner Corner. So much commitment required through here as he now makes his way now down to first gear for Miller Curve. He's sticking with the same medium front tyre that he ran in his first run by the looks of it, but brand new fresh rubber on the rear for the 54.
All the riders reporting yesterday he had a fresh soft rear tyre and he was getting a lot of push on the front on what was a used front tyre, something that you have to factor in here. If you get pushed offline through one corner, the corners will join up with each other so quickly here. Fast and flowing this Phillip Island circuit. Yellow flag inside, all down at turn 6 then. Oh, it's Lorenzo Savadori. Lorenzo Savadori is what appears to be a jinxed factory Aprilia. Factory Aprilia. Well, it's dished out so much punishment for Jorge Martin in 2025. And that poor Lorenzo Savadori, we could see that he was lying prone in the gravel trap down at Siberia as he just lost the front on the hard front tyre on the outlap. Concerns, of course, for Lorenzo Savadori. Thankfully, that's good news. Good news for Sava because he has got to his feet, but this is going to surely be. He thought he was going to fly.
He got into the back of KTM.
He thought he was going to fly with Binder. A massive stoppie on the front end of that RSGP. Just getting sucked in behind Binder into Siberia. Real nasty landing that as well for Savadori. No wonder he took a bit of time to compose himself in the gravel trap. That would have certainly knocked the wind out of him. Oh, me, that was a real nasty one as far as Savadori's concerned. He had post the lap time, he was 9th. That scary instant happened. But Binder got away with what they did. I mean, Binder was probably blissfully unaware of all the drama that was unfolding behind him as Morbidelli comes in our first spin through the long lap penalty loop.
Yeah, which just scrapped his that. He added a personal best through the first sector. Miller lights up the second sector, the fastest sector 2 so far, and he came around up to Siberia just as the yellow flags were cleared. So this lap should count for Jack.
Yeah, we know how good the Yamaha is through these fast and flowing sections. An agile motorcycle. Doesn't really have any major issues dealing with the windy conditions here as well. In Phillip Island, that's all clean as a whistle. From Miller through 10, then now through 11, estimating P2 from the Australian skinny twice. This could actually be a Q1 topping time coming in from the 43, full lean angle, and now full power unleashes on that M1 down at the Gardner Straight. Where's this taking Jack Miller? Over the line he goes. It's second, a 127.215. He's not going to be able to push Miller from P2 into Q2.
Well, he said yesterday that what he might have to do on these qualifying laps is not engage the front start device at the start of the lap, but then engage it at the end of the lap where he wants the speed off the straight through the final corner. Zarco is personal best. He goes into 4th place on a 27.3, but he's 2/10 shy of Q2.
It's Albuquerque at the moment. That 127.071 is keeping Albuquerque at the top of this Q1 session. He's at the top of it by a pretty decent margin, to be fair, as Albuquerque, almost a 10.5 clear of Miller. Binder then pushed out of that top 2 by just 0.04 of a second. No favours, as you knew there wouldn't be from his former KTM teammate Miller.
Binder is responding though. He's just set the fastest second sector, even quicker than Miller's going. Miller, as you can see on your screens, is lit up with red in sector 2, but Binder is even faster. Mir is also having a crack at this, trying to put a Honda through the Q2.
Yeah, Mir is just behind Miller, I think, is the on the road. So Mir at the moment in 5th place, just 1 place behind fellow Honda rider Zarco.
Here comes
Binder. Binder then on course for massive tank slapper for Albuquerque out of the final corner, and now he's going to be looking at Miller and Binder, wondering if he's going to actually be relegated outside of this top 2. Otherwise Miller will go. Miller stays in 2nd. Oh, how close was that? 9,000 down. And Binder does find a PB lap of 127.109. Talk about fine margins, narrow gaps. Binder just 200ths behind Miller in 2nd place. Oh, that mistake late on coming out of the final turn. Doesn't look like it's going to cost Albuquerque, does it? Because he could have easily been pushed out of Q2 there.
Here's the head shake then coming out of the final corner. It's already starting to get loose there, and then as soon as he gets on the curve, he's trying to build the power up, but of course the bike is fighting him on the way out of turn 12. You just saw on your screens there a moment ago the incident involving Binder and Savadori is being investigated by the stewards. Of course, it was difficult to tell with the slow-mo replay we got, but they'll want to know if Binder was going unnecessarily slowly on the way into Siberia.
Siberia is where he is right now. You can see still a little bit of debris from Salvadori's factory Aprilia in the gravel trap there. So Aldeguer then does have a chance to make it 4 poles in 4 years here in Phillip Island, having advanced through a Q1 session. Did it by a whisker. Not even 400ths of a second covered your top 3. It is Aldeguer and Miller as Johan Zarco is raging his frustration.
He was on the fastest second sector. He's clearly caught Binder, who was trying to stay out of the way. We saw him on the edge of the racetrack, but clearly wasn't out of Johan Zarco's way. And Zarco's miserable mood this morning just got a whole lot worse.
Binder's already under investigation. The incident involving him and Salvador is already under investigation. Well, that surely will be looked at as well. Some real controversial ending of this to that session as far as Brad Binder's concerned. Johan Zarco, with some justification, absolutely livid with the Red Bull KTM factory racing rider, because before he was, obviously he felt balked by Binder on that last lap. He was going to be clearly on course for Q2. So yeah, Binder under investigation now for 2 separate incidents in that Q1 session. One late on involving Zarco when he was on a real hot lap, and one mid-session when Lorenzo Salvadori almost tagged the back of the RC16 going into Siberia. This was the aftermath.
We've got a quarter earlier than that, don't we? Because it's clearly after, before that, Zarco was already rolling off there. He clearly seen Binder in the middle of turn 7. That was through the hay shed of 8. And Zarco, whether he would have been in Q2, we'll never know, but he was certainly in touch halfway through that lap. As it is, Zarco starts 15th on the grid.
Look at that, Team Boss Lucio Cecchinello stomps away from the screen and sort of walks away very, very frustrated. He paces up the pit wall there. He's so angry because that's just a weekend changer. Zarco will tell us that, well, he had the pace for Q2 and he's going to be starting now in the 15th place. Here's Binder trying to slot his way back onto circuit. Zarco flying through there, and it just a blur of red, green and white.
You want to be on the left-hand side of the circuit because you're going right through the hay shed.
Absolutely livid, absolutely livid. Now there's Binder's KTM mechanics looking on. Simon Crafar is going to be busy looking at 2 separate incidents involving the South African. Spectacular to watch, but that will not be any crumb of comfort as far as Salvador and in particular Johan Zarco are concerned. Binder, he is all action, he's all aggression, isn't he, on top of that RC16. But will there be some kind of sanction coming his way? 2 incidents from the FY MotoGP stewards to pour over involving the number 33. 37.109 was Binder's best lap in that session. It was dramatic. It was a 15 minutes where it didn't all go according to plan for Binder. He almost washed out the front there. He was right out for the marbles at turn 4. You can see the long lap penalty loop was on his outside. But Jack Miller, top job. The Aussie fans will have representation then in our upcoming Q2 session, courtesy of a 127.080 from Miller, which is only 9/1000 of a second away from seeing him lead that Q1 session.
Spectator of Fermin Aldeguer, who contemplates Q2. There wasn't a big gap between Aldeguer and Binder, but Jack Miller did find it, to the relief of the many Aussie fans here at Phillip Island. His first Q2 appearance since Brno pre-summer break. What a time to achieve that from Miller's point of view. Aldeguer quickest then in a very closely contested Q1 session. 38 thousandths covered the top 3, with only the top 2 going through, Aldeguer and Miller. Binder third and under investigation for 2 separate incidents. Joan Mir 4th ahead of the livid Johan Zarco, who was punching the air and punching his bike for the 2nd time this morning. Oliveira 6th from Morbidelli, a season's low 17th for him. Agura 8th from Savadori. Bastianini, whose poor weekend shows no sign of improving. Sulkiat Chantra and Michele Pirro, the only riders behind him.
So the home hero Miller has already produced some home heroics in Q1. Are there more to come in the 15-minute Q2 session coming up shortly, which will involve Fabio Quartararo, Fabio Di Gianantonio, 2 names that are surely going to be contenders for the front row. All the 2 Fabios have some competition from Fermin for pole position here then in round 19 in Australia. It's Fermin Aldeguer, the Manulica winner. The tops of Q1, the back of the pole in Australia, coming up next live. Well, that is a shot, that is a sight which we will never tire of seeing. The brilliant, wonderful high-speed Phillip Island circuit, built all the way back in 1956. What a job the original designers did, because it has not been touched since its inauguration in the mid-1950s. It is iconic. It is one of MotoGP's classic blue ribbon events, isn't it? The Australian Grand Prix in 2025. We're about to find out who'll be starting it from pole position. Q2 coming up next here at a rather blustery Phillip Island. Thankfully, though, a dry at Phillip Island after there was a little bit of rain that fell on this coastal circuit in Moto3 and in Moto2 practice earlier on this morning. It's a bit breezy. It's certainly a lot cooler, a lot chillier than our last Grand Prix over in Mandalika in Indonesia, but it has not stopped the Aussie fans coming out in droves to support their own. Jockey also, Senna Aegis, looking really, really strong and potential podium contenders in Moto3 and Moto2 tomorrow. And Jack Miller will be in the hunt for pole position coming up in Q2 next, having just come through Q1 with Indonesian Grand Prix winner Fermin Aldeguer, which means in the hunt for pole position in Australia, and Marco Bezzecchi, who has been dynamite so far here this weekend. Fastest yesterday with a record-breaking 126.492. Fastest this morning in FP2 as well. Also in Q2, Ralph Fernandez trying to make it back-to-back front rows. With Gian Antonio and Quartararo looking strong. Alex Marquez looking to take another giant leap towards second in the World Championship. Rins Marini, who had a rather spectacular engine failure in FP2 this morning down the start-finish straight. Paul Espargaro excelling on the KTM Tech 3 machine in for Viñales. Bagnaia and Acosta, they were already directly through to Q2 yesterday, joined by Aldeguer and Miller. Well, it's been the Bezzecchi show so far here this weekend in Phillip Island. Bezzecchi on pole position already so far this year. The Red Bull Ring in Austria, 2 poles in the last 3 Grand Prix, one of course in front of his home crowd in Misano. He was our most recent pole starter last time out in Mandalika, so looking for his 3rd pole in the last 4 Grand Prix. And of course, some rather sad news to bring you. The last bit of news we wanted to be bringing you, the 3 riders that started on the front row of the grid here in Phillip Island last year. Boy Martin from pole position, Marc Marquez from the front row. Of course, there was the tear-off drama in the Grand Prix, which dropped Marc back to 13th before he came through to take his 4th MotoGP success here in Australia last year. And Maverick Viñales, the top 3 on the grid here last year, all sadly sidelined through injury.
Well, just to re-emphasise what I said in free practice 2 earlier on this morning, this feels like a pole position that Marco Bezzecchi really needs to take. 2 long lap penalties await him in tomorrow's Grand Prix. And if he's going to overcome those, the best way of doing that is to take pole position and then have the opportunity to lead early in the race, set his pace, mitigate the penalties, and come back further into the pack and have fewer riders to overtake. So from Marco Bezzecchi's point of view, yes, he's got the clear, obvious pace advantage so far this weekend, which will certainly benefit him in the sprint this afternoon when he is penalty-free. But one thing Marco Bezzecchi cannot afford is a mistake in this Q2 session. The only way of overcoming his obvious handicap tomorrow is to start at the very front.
Great to see such a heavy Yamaha presence in this Q2 session. Coming up next, Fabio Quartararo has looked bang on form all weekend. Will he take the risk and run the soft rear tyre in the main Grand Prix here tomorrow? Alex Rins was safely through from Monster Energy Yamaha yesterday as well in 6th place. And having negotiated that tricky Q1, Jack Miller also joining the field. Well, it's a spectacular sight, isn't it? The Bass Strait nestled next to this Phillip Island circuit. So many Jack Miller fans that have made the trip south. First Q2 appearance for Miller since now it's 2 years since we saw the 30-year-old Australian from Townsville start a MotoGP race on the front row of the grid. That was the Japanese Grand Prix in Motegi 2023. It's a podium finish here previously in front of his home crowd. Memorable fashion in 2019 when he was 3rd at the Maverick Viñales' last lap crash. So here we go then. Q2 underway then here in Phillip Island, and Pedro Costa eager to get on with business. He will lead the field out of pit lane then to start this 15-minute session.
And what a Pecco Bagnaia in this Q2 session. We haven't spoke about him much as a genuine front-row contender here this afternoon, because we're not entirely sure that he is, as we get confirmation of news that is just reaching us here in the commentary box. His schedule has been altered for tomorrow due to the weather forecast in Phillip Island. The decision has been made to move the timetable for Sunday 1 hour later. So every session tomorrow is going to take place 1 hour later than previously scheduled, which means that the Moto3 race will begin at midday, Moto2 at 11:15. You can now see it on your screens. The MotoGP race, in an attempt to dodge the worst of the wind tomorrow, will now start at 3 p.m. local time tomorrow.
So adjust your travel plans accordingly, folks. Adjust your arrival times here in Phillip Island accordingly tomorrow. 21 laps and the race action will get underway for Moto3 at midday. That's noon. The MotoGP warm-up. Now, some of you like to get in early and catch the Premier Class riders in action, prepping for the Grand Prix. That'll be at 10:40 a.m. at local time. So there was a few suggestions. The riders met in the Safety Commission here last night about the possibility of a repeat of 2023, moving the Australian Grand Prix to this afternoon's schedule to maybe avoid first tomorrow's look like being the strongest and the worst of the wind is coming from the party. All have cleared through the morning by tomorrow. I think early on in the morning, till about sort of 10, 11 a.m. is when there were fears that those 70 km/h predicted gusts were really going to come back to Phillip Island. So that's why the adjusted weather forecasting, the wind is making the tail off quite significantly as the day progresses. So that's the reason why we've got that slightly adjusted race schedule.
We are still expecting much warmer conditions tomorrow afternoon. We have at the moment, we're currently only about 14 degrees of air temperature. We're expecting air temperature around 22, 23 degrees for the Grand Prix tomorrow. That would have been the one concern of moving the race later in the afternoon, is the potential drop in temperatures, but that should not be an issue.
Well, we all get a lie in then now tomorrow, don't we? Which I'm sure will be a welcome relief to a few of the party goers in downtown Cowes tonight. They've been enjoying themselves as they always do, come rain or shine here on the Phillip Island. So many fans making the annual pilgrimage down to this spectacular circuit here in Siberia. Right there towards the back end of last year's sprint were a real nasty, vicious off throttle high side. Pedro Costa out of the 2024 Australian Grand Prix. No dramas this time around for Costa as he negotiates that pretty tricky turn 6.
As you can see on your screens, Miller on a worn soft rear tyre, of course, saving his one remaining new rear tyre for the second run of Q2. So don't expect too much necessarily from Jack Miller on this first run. Expect plenty though from Marco Bezzecchi back down the road. Surely we're going to be back in the 26s in this Q2 section. Dare you can begin to speculate about 25. I don't think we would have speculated before yesterday got underway, but Bezzecchi has moved the goalposts on so far this weekend. The Costa's first lap is a 27.2, already beaten by Alex Marquez.
Yeah, Jack Miller, that's pre-weekend what he thought pole position might be. He said, I think we might see a 126.8. That was immediately demolished by Marco Bezzecchi. It was a 126.580 to destroy Roy Martinez's all-time lap record, and then just for good measure he went even quicker as if to sort of stamp his authority even more over this Australian Grand Prix weekend by 126.492. Alex Marquez, it is early on, that started himself into divisional pole. Yesterday we had an Aprilia 1-2. Putting up the toppers.
Alex Marquez down outside of contours. It is Alex Marquez down at Miller Corner where he crashed into Jack Miller a few years ago. Alex Marquez, your provisional pole sitter on the deck.
Look at this from Aldeguer. Top in Q1. 3 visits to Phillip Island in Moto2. He took pole position in all of them, including a brilliant last gas victory over Aldeguer here last year. Look at this from Aldeguer. We're going to track him now through the final corner. Elbow down he goes through turn 12. Now gets the tail. He had a big tank stopper right at the end of Q1 coming down this particular section of the circuit. Aldeguer up into 8 for the 127.676. Bezzecchi and the Costa on the charge. So too is Pol Espargaro. It's a Costa who we pick up now, charging out of that final corner. Just behind him is Jack Miller, who's up in the second place here. Up into pole. Jack Miller with a barnstormer. The home crowd, well, they'll be going for listing right now. Miller with a 126.885, top of the pile.
Pol Espargaro with the Tech 3 KTM, who's done a 26.995 to take second place. Bezzecchi really punished by being the last rider on the racetrack, so he fought the yellow flags for Alex Marquez's crash.
Well, I just said Jack Miller predicted pole position was going to be 126.8 on Thursday.
Yeah, well, he's right.
He's bang on the money right now. Accurate prediction, although that is likely to change. Here comes Ralph Hernandez, looking for back-to-back front road starts in 2025. He is indeed on course for that, up into P3. The track out a pretty rider with a 127 flat.
Congratulations if you predicted that front row as it stands at the moment. Jack Miller, Pol Espargaro, Ralph Hernandez. Have to go back a long way for the last time Pol Espargaro was on the front row of the grid. Yep, go back shortly to 2020. Here comes Fermin Aldeguer then into the final couple of corners. He lost so much time here on his previous lap, perhaps with the thought of that head shake he had late in Q1 in his mind. Can Aldeguer, if he can keep that 0.9092, that would put him on the front row of the grid.
Second in that second sector because he was fast through the first and then lost 5 seconds. Aldeguer then up into P4. Silverstone, the British Grand Prix 2021, the last time Pol Espargaro started on the front row. This will be some awesome job by Pol Espargaro. Last week he was on a shopping trip in the Big Apple in New York with his wife. This is the reason why Bezzecchi's last lap went all awry. He was up through the first sector. At this point, it's Pecco Bagnaia ahead of him on the 63 factory Ducati.
I think he just goes in quite hard there. He's angry there. He nearly runs into Marini. Marini's doing nothing wrong though. He's on the outside of the racetrack. It's more Bagnaia that got in the way of Bezzecchi, who is absolutely raging. It's been a scrappy start to this session. He was caught by the Alex Marquez yellows at turn 4 on the lap before this, and then found traffic on his next lap.
Well, we know how Bezzecchi and Bagnaia look to do a bit of trash talking behind the scenes. They are the ultimate trash talkers, self-styled themselves. Oh well, there's going to be some trash talking, isn't there, after that particular incident? Frustrated there in the extreme, wasn't he, Marco Bezzecchi. Alex Marquez then was in P1 when he decked it into the Miller corner at turn 4. A few moments to go. Jack, what's going on?
Yeah, good news for Alex. It was a low speed off, which means there's minimal damage. A new brake detector, new side fairing, which he's just taken off the number 2 machine, and that should be it. Foot peg as well, I think they're just checking that looks okay. They're moving the dirt off of it. So the good news for Alex Marquez, he's going to be able to get back out there on his number 1 machine.
Better news as far as Brazilian racing are concerned, it is, because Aldeguer, thanks for the update, Jack Aldeguer has gone up into second place, set the exact same lap time of 126.995 over Pol Espargaro. Still Miller with a pretty healthy advantage of over 1/10 of a second in that battle for pole position. Miller's last pole position was 3 years ago at Misano in 2022. His last front row, as I mentioned, 2023 at the Japanese Grand Prix. Motegi, it's been a long time since Miller has been fighting for the front row.
So that was the Alex Marquez crash. Quite a long way around the Miller hairpin. We know the whole circuit after Miller, if he can convert pole position here. And that was the incident that brought out the yellow flags, which trashed Bezzecchi's first time lap. And the next one, of course, was balked by Pecco Bagnaia. Bagnaia himself is 10th at the moment, 1 place ahead of Bez.
Actually, classic turn 4 exit crash, losing the front just as you start to tap the power back in, feed the throttle back in, it just unloads the front tyre, and down you go. The incident involving Bezzecchi and Bagnaia is going to be looked at on the brakes, then going into the Miller corner. The F1 MotoGP stewards have had their hands full in our 2 qualifying sessions so far. Brad Binder under investigation twice in Q1. Through Stoner corner we go. You're seriously motoring at this point of the circuit, aren't you? Then Bezzecchi was upon Pecco Bagnaia. Got a little bit startled there, didn't he? As Bez charged on his inside, and Luca Marini, in fact Bez and Marini were pretty fortunate not to make contact there.
Yeah, everyone who was ahead of Bezzecchi was all backing off. So those are 2 of Marco Bezzecchi's very best friends, Luca Marini and Pecco Bagnaia, that he's waving and swearing at on the outside of Miller corner. So all of them have work to do here. Bezzecchi down in 11th, Bagnaia 10th. Marini did a fierce to both of them. He's up in 5th.
You just like that, Bez is going, mamma mia, inside his helmet. I don't know about
something stronger.
Trash talking, trash shouting it will be after this section. Bezzecchi is denied pole position. It has proved costly as Miller goes off-roading. At the moment, Bezzecchi was a red hot favourite for pole position, down in 11th place.
Miller's out lap, but he's gone off the track, so he needs to clean those tyres up before he starts the lap there. Where is Jack Miller on the racetrack? He is somewhere in the second sector, we believe, so he might have been off at Siberia, but either way, he needs to clean those tyres up. Of course, he now has his one remaining fresh soft rear tyre available to him.
Careful as well, because it'll be pretty damp and wet grass as he made his way back onto the circuit. Alex Marquez then now looking to bounce back from his turn 4 crash. A little bit of the scrape marks on the right-hand side of that Gresini fairing. Raul Fernandez then so close to yet another front row. Just over 100th, he is currently behind Pol Espargaro. Miller without a pole position in 3 years. Pol Espargaro without a front row in 4 years. What we said, it was going to be a bit unpredictable, a bit wild and hard to call here in Phillip Island with no Marquez, no Martin, no Viñales, and it is going to the script, and we love it.
Miller went up at turn 2, by the way. He was in the first sector. He just came past us through his own Miller hairpin, so he has got plenty of time to clean those tyres up and build some temperature before he starts his next flying lap.
Right in the bumps, so you put that Aprilia on its right-hand side going through the Doohan corner. Bezzecchi's a real big 4 minutes. This is not what was in the master plan at all. Down in 11th place at the moment is Bez. He's had a real strong first sector, another big head shake. Nervous that Aprilia looks underneath Bez so far this morning. Drops anchor then now into turn 4. A bit of chatter on the front end there as well as he squeezed the hand for the brake on that Aprilia. Alex Rins charging up behind Bezzecchi, because Rins was trying to go here with the Aprilia star. Bez, Acosta, Raul Fernandez all on strong laps.
Well, we know Bez can do a 26.4. He did one yesterday. He's going to need something like that to snatch pole position away here, because surely everyone's going to go faster. Acosta going very quickly halfway around the lap. Bezzecchi now up and over Mookie Heights and dropping down into turn 10, where the third sector is completed, and it's a good third sector for Bezzecchi, but he's not got a lot of time to play with.
Yes, this Acosta back in Japan last year, and he's looking really strong. Right on the money here, isn't he? The 21-year-old Spaniard. He'll flick it left now, going through turn 11. It looks like at the moment this could be Bez Acosta shootout for pole position. Quattararo's also on a really good lap. In fact, Quattararo's mullered the first sector by only 2/10. Raul Fernandez briefly up in a second. He finds a 1:26.565. So close to his own all-time lap record. Acosta up into second. Bezzecchi then 3/10 clear of Acosta in second. Miller now clinging on to a home and front row. He's on the front row in third place by just 300. So second, that's Marquez down again. That's a big one. That's into the Doohan corner. Well, the barrel rolls through the gravel trap for the number 73, and then he is first. That's a real nasty one there. High speed get off that into the first corner for Alex. So at the moment, he will just cross the line and set the 4th fastest time of the session.
Turn 1, he's into the heart of the corner there, front end washes. Fortunately, plenty of space there for Alex Marquez to crash into, but understandably breathing very heavily there in the turn 1 gravel trap. That will have taken the wind out of his sails, and it's certainly taken away any hope of Alex Marquez starting on the front row of the grid.
See him going back down through the gearbox, then you just saw the front up. Was it a little bit wider offline? Was he caught out by the bumps? Was it a gust of wind that just picked up that front tyre? That happens so often here in Phillip Island. Bezzecchi is not done here, is he? He is not done at all. 1:26.492 set yesterday was his own all-time lap record. Now that's under a real big threat. This could be a 26.3 from Bez. Raul Fernandez trying to push himself back on the front row, stays in fifth. Over the line, Bez goes. It's a 1:26.496, 4,000th of a second outside of his all-time lap record set yesterday. Surely, with 90 seconds of the session remaining, Bez has got his 3rd pole in the last 4 Grand Prix, safe and secured.
The rider who's really suffered through these yellow flags is Quattararo. He botched the lap before the yellows came out and then caught the yellows for Alex Marquez's crash, who is now fortunately walking as he now expects the damage to his Gresini Ducati. So Quattararo is going to get one more shot at this. He's down in 10th place. Pecco Bagnaia is still down in 11th.
Those, of course, in the main Grand Prix over 27 laps tomorrow. Bagnaia then, last flying lap incoming for the double world champion. Not lower than 4th in his last 4 Grand Prix here in Australia. 3 podiums in the last 3, that includes as well. Marco Bezzecchi, he has done that long lap penalty countless times so far this weekend, just to try and minimize nice damage of those 2 long laps will follow now. Bagnaia, no, he's rolled out of it. Didn't fancy that at all, did he? I think he just had a bit of a moment there, some movement on the front end and was, yeah, just didn't want to commit because he smelled trouble brewing.
Continuing to start on the 4th row of the grid in 11th place. Alex Rins, who's behind him, is not improving, so Bagnaia will at least stay in 11th. The big threats, though, to Gian Antonio Marini and Quartararo. Quartararo and Jack Miller have just set the fastest second sectors.
Quartararo then has threatened a big lap. He's threatened a front row. Polis Viagra, who breathed him, was looking on course for his first front row start in 4 years. What a fairy tale that would have been for the KTM on. He's taking the checker flag. Best pole can be is 7th. Bezzecchi, we know, has also taken the checker flag. Here comes Gian Antonio and really powering down the start finish straight. Marini up into 8th. Quartararo. This is going to be super close, isn't it? Likewise for Jack Miller. Marco Bezzecchi's 126.496. All of a sudden, looking to be under real threat here. Quartararo then powers the factory Yamaha down the Gardner straight, and he's pinched it. What a lap! What a brilliant lap by Fabio Quartararo. He has taken pole position. The 20 fans are delirious. A 126.465 is a new all-time lap record. Massimo Rivola, Aprilia boss, looks on with nothing but admiration and respect. A flying finish from Fabio Quartararo, who looks like he's taken pole by just 3/100ths of a second. At the end of all the drama, yet he realises that he has done it. A show-stopping lap time that by Fabio Quartararo. And after all the drama, all the chaos, out of Q1 and onto the front row of the grid for the first time in over 2 years, it's the home hero with a heroic performance on Sprint Saturday so far. Jack Miller in 3rd place. What a session. 2 Yamahas on the front row of the grid here in Phillip Island.
Yeah, you have to go back a long way to find the last time 2 Yamahas were on the front row of a MotoGP grid. It was going to take something special to beat Marco Bezzecchi this morning. Well, Fabio Quartararo is something very special. A new all-time lap record for the 2021 World Champion. His 5th pole of the season, pole number 21 in MotoGP for FQ20.
That was absolutely phenomenal by Fabio Quartararo. He nailed the perfect lap there at the end of that session. A 126.465. That's half a second faster than what he managed to be knock on the door of the top 3 in practice yesterday. He is pure class. He is pure quality, isn't he, the Frenchman? 2 Yamahas then on the front row of the grid. Jack Miller in 3rd place. First time in 4 years since Assen in 2021. Absolutely unbelievable performance by Thriller Miller. Superb by Jack coming out of Q1, which is one of the toughest challenges of a Grand Prix weekend these days, given how deep the talent pool is in MotoGP. Miller did it though, second behind Aldeguer, and he's on the front row of the grid for the first time in over 2 years. Stunning performance by Miller. Raul Fernandez almost making it back-to-back front rows in 4th. Acosta drops back to 5th. Fermin Aldeguer is in 7th place. 2 crashes in that session for Alex Marquez. He still somehow finds himself at the back of the 2nd row in 6th place. 749 days since his last sprint row at Montega in 2023. As I said, Miller on your front row.
And for the first time in 98 Grand Prix, there is no Ducati on the front row of the grid. The first Ducati is Alex Marquez, despite 2 crashes, in 6th place.
Pedro Acosta, we always know that they're running a light fuel low at the end of those Q2 sessions. Acosta looks like he's run out of juice. 5th place for Pedro Acosta. Well, some session that, wasn't it? Ducati's front row streak has ended. It was always going to come at some point. They'd like to have extended it into the triple figures. But you always felt coming into this weekend with no Marc Marquez, no Roy Martin, that he was going to free up space inside that top 3 for somebody who was going to seize the opportunity, seize the moment. And Fabio Quartararo has seized the moment, and he has seized pole position in quite stunning fashion here in Phillip Island. Yeah, you can see how hard he had to work for it. You know, Fabio Quartararo was on his absolute limit, getting everything out of himself and that wide start M1. A 126.465. A lap for the ages here from the Frenchman in Australia.
Well, it wasn't already a big opportunity for Fabio Quartararo this weekend. It just got even bigger. Bezzecchi, of course, second next to him with his 2 long lap penalties. Fabio Di Gianantonio, who we thought was a real contender to potentially win this weekend, he's back in 10th place. Don't rule out this man, though, Pedro Acosta. Even if his KTM is no longer running, he's very much in the game, starting on row 2.
He was on a gas machine last year. No gas on this occasion as far as Pedro Acosta is concerned. 5th on the grid. 2 Yamahas and on the front row for the first time in 4.5 years. Quartararo on pole. Jack Miller in front of his home crowd in 3rd place. Can they quite believe what they've just seen in Q2 Yamaha? Well, let's find out from the boss, Paolo Pavesio. What a session, Jack.
Yeah, incredible job by Yamaha. The guy's just telling me first time in over 4 years you've had 2 bikes on the front row of the grid. Fabio doing it again, and what a moment for Jack here at Phillip Island.
Super happy. Fabio was great. It was a tricky Q2, yellow flag. Finally, the last lap was just perfect. I'm super happy for Jack as well, because he's his own GP and he was close to Q2 many times in the last race. It was a bit of a different moment of the season, but I think this is a great boost for him in front of the home crowd.
Great job, well done.
Grazie.
A massive boost for Miller in front of his home crowd. The Aussie fans have not witnessed one of their own starting a MotoGP race on the front row since Casey Stoner all the way back in 2012. The last of Stoner's 6 successive victories here at Phillip Island, at a track which he made his own. It was all the case of that period of Casey's career where we kind of jetted down to Phillip Island, sort of wondering, well, who was going to finish second behind the then Wizard of Oz. Fabio Quartararo, though. He has delivered some absolutely top draw qualifying laps so far this season. That has to be right up there as well. Another all-time lap record. Terminal de Guerre looks a little bit frustrated. He just maybe dealing with a little bit of muscle issue in that right arm, as you can just see with his thumb there, squeezing the bicep. It's hard work keeping control of a 300 horsepower MotoGP bike around Phillip Island. So much movement, so physical with the wind that you have to contend with it as well. Aldeguer then, if he's to be our first rookie in 12 years since Marc Marquez in 2013 to win back-to-back MotoGP race, he's going to have to do it from the head of the 3rd row in 7th. Well, it's his first and front row start in 2 years. Put up a great fight for pole position. It's Aussie, isn't it? Jack Miller on the front row in front of his home crowd. Let's hear his thoughts for another Jack.
Back onto the front row, and what a place to do it as well. Here at Phillip Island, it's the first time these guys are going to be able to cheer on an Aussie on the front row since Casey Stoner. Just how good does this feel? Just how good does this feel? Well, yeah, no, it's unreal. Obviously, I was a bit disappointed with how yesterday went yesterday afternoon. You know, I felt like we had great speed from the get-go, and just lacked the little improvements that we needed yesterday afternoon, but we put our head down last night and able to get the bike to where I needed it basically this morning. Thankfully we had that dry time this morning, and it's awesome. I mean, the Aussie fans are out here in numbers is unreal to see, and you know, to be back on the front row and honestly on a bike that we can fight today and tomorrow. So no, I'm looking forward to it. See what we can get, you know, try and keep our nose clean. I've got my rear view mirrors on for toning up. We're down at Miller Corner. Hopefully, you know, we don't repeat that, and should be a good day. Well done. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Well, let's hope it's a great Sunday, because it's been a stunning and superb Saturday so far, hasn't it, for Jack Miller and his army of Aussie fans who have come to watch him here in Phillip Island. First front row since Japan 2023. Can he tomorrow make it his first podium since that 3rd place in a rare Spanish Grand Prix back in 2023? More pressing matters, of course, coming up this afternoon for Jack will be a 13-lap Tissot sprint. And he'll be looking for just his 3rd sprint podium. And this is wife Ruby. Proud of her man's work in that unbelievable session. The best Q2s we've had of the season so far. We've had plenty of them, haven't we, now, opening 19 Grand Prix in 2025. Jack Miller then on the front row. Marco Bezzecchi, well, he was absolutely stunning, wasn't he, on Friday? So close to a 3rd pole in the last 4 Grand Prix. He'll start second, and he's with Jack.
Another brilliant lap in what looked like a really tricky session. You had to dig deep with that final time attack, but I imagine it's job done being on the front row. Yeah, I'm very happy. I'm happy because the target was to reach the first 2 rows, as always, and we grabbed the first one, so it's even better. Of course, after yesterday, I was confident that I could do a good lap time, and fortunately, I confirmed myself similar to yesterday. The condition was a bit more tough this morning, but the performance was good, so happy, and now we can focus on the sprint.
Great job, well done.
Thank you very much.
Certainly fast, he's certainly consistent, is Bezzecchi. Just 4 thousandths of a second between his best time in practice yesterday and the time he's just produced in Q2 to finish a close second to Fabio Quartararo. That's front row start number 16 in MotoGP for the 26-year-old Italian, but he keeps on producing these awesome qualifying laps in 2025, doesn't he? An all-time lap record and yet another stunning pole for Fabio Quartararo. Who's the jack?
Fabio, you've done it again. You've dug deep and found the most incredible lap time after a tough period. How nice does it feel to be back in Park Fermé, back on pole position?
Yeah, really nice. It was a long time since Assen, but yeah, today is a really special one because I didn't feel ready to make really a 26.4. The goal was to make 26.7, more or less. So I'm super happy, and also I think that our pace is not so bad. So focus on the sprint, and let's try to make a great first lap. That will be really important.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Another great job by Fabio Quartararo. Great job and a great morning for Yamaha. 2 Yamahas on the front row of the grid for the first time since Assen, all the way back in 2021. A MotoGP grid which will not feature a Ducati for the first time since Valencia, all the way back in 2020. The time lap records being broken for fun, aren't they, so far here this weekend? Just under 300 inside Bezzecchi's best time from yesterday. We've not seen a single 126 lap in Grand Prix history around this Phillip Island track. Well, we have been blessed with dozens of them already so far this weekend. That's the realisation. That's when, with the big risk, comes big reward as far as Quartararo is concerned. Pole position number 21 in his MotoGP career. 24th time that Quartararo will start from pole position in his World Championship campaign. Diego Gabellini is crew chief there, offering his congratulations. He knows how special a rider he has on top of that Wisdar M1. Fabio Quartararo bidding tomorrow for what would be his first MotoGP victory since Sachsenring back in 2022. And of course, this afternoon over 13 laps, I'm sure you're going to join us 3 p.m. local time. Quartararo pole position bidding for what would be his first ever Tissot sprint success.
Well, it was Yamaha versus Aprilia in the end in that Q2 session. Quartararo beats Bezzecchi to pole position. Jack Miller, a very crowd-pleasing third. Raul Fernandez very much in the game too for 4th. Top KTM is Pedro Acosta in 5th. Alex Marquez after one slow crash and one very fast one. 6th ahead of Fermin Aldeguer and Pol Espargaro. Lucia Marini top Honda 9th. Fabio Di Gianantonio, he's going to have to make up some serious ground to win from 10th. Bagnaia 11th from Alex Rins and Brad Binder, who is under investigation for 2 Q1 incidents. Joan Mir 14th ahead of John Zarco, Miguel Oliveira, and a season's worst 17th for Frankie Morbidelli. Ayagura lines up 18th ahead of Lorenzo Savadori. A miserable weekend continues for Enea Bastianini in 20th place. Somkia Chantra and Mikhaili Piro will line up behind him. As far as the BMW M Award is concerned, well, Marc Marquez, of course, not here, but he does have a one hand on those keys now to a brand new M1 with 3 weekends to go. He's 59 points clear of Alex Marquez.
How special, how good of a talent is Fabio Quartararo. He just delivered that scintillating pole position here in Phillip Island on a motorcycle which was almost 15 kilometres down through the speed trap compared to the fastest bike in that Q2 session. Just remarkable once again. Just giving clear indication of the pure brilliance of Quartararo. The Yamaha did 339 kilometres through the speed trap. Best in that Q2 session was Pol Espargaro on 354 kilometres. So almost 15 k's down on that Gardner Straight. Yet it's Fabio Quartararo who, through the fast flying corners of Phillip Island, delivered something truly special once again. Fabio Quartararo heading for his first sprint victory later on this afternoon on Sprint Saturday. He will get to try and achieve that accomplishment from pole position. What a Q2 session here with Aussie home hero Jack Miller on the front row. It's a Spring and Grand Prix here in Australia. You are not going to want to miss.